And it's all inextricably linked, our food system, our healthcare system. And so we don't want to perpetuate anything that's not helpful to like most people. We want to create ways to open up access. And so, we're not perfect at it, but we're trying.
Hello, and welcome back to Seek the Joy podcast. Happy Seek the Joy Tuesday. I'm your host, Sydney Weiss, and on the podcast today is Aly French and Erica Stein. They are certified integrative nutrition health coaches, health and wellness experts, and the podcast hosts behind Courageous Wellness. Today's episode is really a powerful conversation about the opportunity that comes from leaning into life's obstacles and how we can begin to bridge the wellness gap. I really loved sitting down with Aly and Erica for today's new episode, and we actually are doing a podcast swap this week. So today they are on Seek the Joy. Tomorrow I will be on Courageous Wellness, and so I'll make sure to link that episode in the show notes once it goes live. And Aly and Erica really have a beautiful story about how they came together to form Courageous Wellness. For Aly, it was after she experienced a cancer diagnosis in her 20s, and for Erica, after a self-love journey that led to a 50-pound weight loss. And so together they've created a platform to interview real people about their experiences in health and wellness. From physical wellness to emotional and spiritual, they hear courageous stories and focus on why it's important to share them. They're also really committed to destigmatizing conversations in the wellness space and celebrating the experiences and lessons of their courageous guests. And so today they're certified holistic integrative nutrition health coaches and speak at live wellness panels and events. And in today's episode, it is such a good one. Aly and Erica share their path to wellness, connecting to self-love and trusting their intuition, and how they came together to create their platform. We talk about how opportunity comes from leaning into life's obstacles, practicing courage, the role of a spiritual practice, and why it's often revolutionary to do your human revolution. We talk about becoming your own health and wellness advocate and what it looks like to make empowered choices in the health and wellness space. My favorite part of this conversation, though, has to be when we talk about bridging the wellness gap and how Aly and Erica are making wellness more accessible and affordable. Plus, Aly and Erica share their wellness mantra, where they're taking courageous wellness next, their biggest dream, and so much more. Before we dive in, though, to today's new episode, I got to give you an update on our Seek the Joy Summit that's going live next Saturday, April 10th, which, by the way, I cannot believe we are only like a week and a half away from the summit. If you haven't heard yet, I'm hosting our first ever Seek the Joy Summit on Saturday, April 10th. It starts at 10 a.m. Pacific. It's our one-day virtual retreat that will be filled with empowering conversations and sessions on mindfulness, finding our joy and choosing positivity, stepping into our authentic voice, the importance of sharing our story. There's going to be so many beautiful opportunities for connection, and I am so excited and actually blown away by the response to the summit too. You're going to hear from past Seek the Joy guests like AJ Sarcione, Aiden Chase, Kelly Rutherford, Audrey Ori, Akia Red, Lysandra Vasquez. The list goes on. So to learn more and register for free, it's totally free, guys. Hit the link in our show notes or go to seekthejoypodcast.com/seekthejoysummit. I only have a handful of spots left though. So if you've been thinking about joining the summit, today is the day to register. The replay will also be available for 3 days after for anybody that registers. So even if you can't attend on the 10th, make sure to register so you can catch the replay. But here's the thing, it doesn't stop there, because when you register for the summit, you are automatically entered into our grand prize giveaway featuring prizes from some of our favorite mindfulness and wellness brands like Yoga Wake Up, Your Joyologist, Mind Travel, the I Am Journal, La Chic Miami, Sustainabar, the list goes on and on. So to check out that giveaway, make sure you register for the summit. Go to seekthejoypodcast.com/seekthejoysummit or hit the link in our show notes. Register today to enter the giveaway. And I am just Oh, so excited. I cannot wait to see you there. I can't believe it's a week and a half away, and it's going to be so much fun. All right, that's it. That's all I've got for today's new episode. I'm really excited to share this one with you with Aly and Erica. I love the conversation about leaning into life's obstacles and knowing that opportunity will always come from what it is that we're experiencing. So make sure to join the conversation on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter and LinkedIn. We are at Seek the Joy Podcast everywhere. No matter where you're listening right now, make sure that you hit follow or subscribe. And if you can, leave us a 5-star rating and review. Ratings and reviews really help the podcast get seen by new people and share, with them what Seek the Joy is all about. So when you leave us that review, take a screenshot and send it to Sydney at seekthejoypodcast.com. I will send you a little something to say thank you. And it's always just such a fun way for us to connect outside of the show. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Aly and Erica of Courageous Wellness. Aly and Erica, I am really excited to have you both on the podcast. Last week we recorded for your show. It was a lot of fun. And I was telling Erica before we recorded, it feels like it was a lifetime ago. Like I can't believe it was only last week. So I'm excited to continue the conversation. Thank you both for coming on the podcast.
Oh, it's our pleasure. Thank you for having us.
So I'm thinking a really good place to start is you both have a really interesting wellness journey. So Erica, maybe if you want to kick it off, share with us your journey to wellness, and how, let's talk about your journeys to wellness and then how you two came together, because I think it's a pretty cool story.
Absolutely. I'll do like the Spark Notes version of mine and then give it to Aly to share hers and how we came together. But my wellness journey, how I got into wellness was through a self-love and 50-pound weight loss experience. And so basically, I grew up in Malibu, California, which is a beautiful little beach town, very affluent community. But when I was a young girl, my parents went through some pretty hard times, financially. And because of that, we were on free lunch programs in our Malibu public schools and eating a lot of fast food. And so those habits were created for me, and I carried a bit of extra weight kind of from the time I was 12 onward, when that really accelerated for my parents. And so I mentioned that because I'm very passionate about like food affordability and accessibility, which stems from that experience. But my habits were built and I always carried extra weight, but it never was really something I focused on or was a quote like problem, nothing like that. It was just something more of, I knew I carried extra weight, and I would go through phases where I'd like go really hard at the gym, eat quote clean, try to lose weight, but nothing really stuck. And so that was kind of the cycle I was in until I was about 21, 22 years old. I was working in entertainment on a couple TV shows, and I kept blaming my weight. That's when everything changed, where I kept blaming my weight on what wasn't happening in my life, right? Like if I lost this weight, I'd be in a successful romantic relationship. If I lost this weight, I would be advancing in my career. Whatever wasn't happening was blamed on my weight. And that's total bullshit. It's just total BS. And it really took a really wonderful friend who I know through the Buddhist, or I'm Buddhist. Aly and I are both Buddhist. That kind of is a tease on how we met later on. A wonderful friend I met through our Buddhist organization. And she had so much compassion for my life. And I went on a really bad date and I was complaining because he didn't call me. And I said to her, I was like, if I was prettier, if I was thinner, he would have called. And she just had such compassion for my life. But she said to me, Erica, you don't value your life. Like you don't treasure yourself at all. And her words really floored me, and they were exactly what I needed to hear. And so I went home and we chant. So I started chanting I wrote on a hot pink Post-it on my Buddhist altar in my home. And I wrote just to really deeply treasure my life. I was like, I am a treasure. I am a precious gem. I have value exactly as I am. And that prayer, it changed my entire life because I started to feel that way. And when I felt that way at my heaviest weight, my career really took off. At my heaviest weight, I met the man who is now my husband and just the greatest man alive. He's like the definition of just good and wonderful. I love him so much. And my whole life transformed at my heaviest. So when I loved myself, that's why it was really a self-love journey. And then subsequently, I started moving my body because a girlfriend and I wanted to try a trendy spin class, and I loved it and I enjoyed it. And I only went like 2 days a week. I didn't really focus on what I was eating. And less than a year later, I lost 50 pounds. And so that's my weight loss and self-love journey. But that really took me, and Aly will share, Aly and I met during that point, but after I lost the weight, I started to really have to do the work on how I felt about my body because there was body dysmorphia. I had digestive and gut issues. Like the weight was gone, but I still had to deal with all this stuff.
Yeah.
And that's when I started really diving into nutrition. And that was kind of my journey into becoming a health coach together with Aly on top of being a podcast host. So I could go into more, but I'm going to pause here and let Aly share her journey and how it brought us together. So,
okay, Aly, you go for it.
Our love story, how we came together. So I historically have been a professional performing artist, actually, is my background. Mostly in musical theater. I'm a singer and actor, and I've traveled quite a bit for that job. And I've always had to fuel myself in a certain way, especially when working, to really have a certain kind of energy, which you have to do as a live performer, have for your output. So I've always had an interest in how I fueled myself as far as food goes. And I would experiment with different types of eating, and it was just something of interest to me. And I was a fairly healthy person. And then out of the blue, I, at 29, got diagnosed with a rare form of cancer. It was a tumor on my back. And I went through an experience where I basically looked like a bruise that hadn't gone away. And I thought I got it from doing a show. You get beat up sometimes, you hit something or hit the person next to you. And, but it wasn't going away. And I asked the doctor about it and was told to ignore it. It's not, he said, oh, it's nothing. And I just had this little thing saying, maybe it's not nothing. And then I went to my general physician and I asked her to keep an eye on it. And she did very thoroughly, but it took about a year. And I basically was diagnosed with this rare form of cancer that starts in the skin and then can grow down through different linings, muscle lining, eventually into organs if it's not caught. And so I was diagnosed with that. And it was sort of this wake up call of like, wait, I'm a healthy person and I have cancer. Like it was sort of this invincibility bubble burst. It was actually quite a gift in that way. And I was fortunate that I caught it when it was not aggressive. It had not become aggressive yet. So I was able to get it treated with 3 separate surgeries, but it only took surgeries. So I was really, really lucky that the stage that I caught it in, surgery was took a few, but it was the only course of treatment that I had to go through. And when I was recovering from my 3rd and final surgery, sitting on the couch with staples in my back, I started craving, I'm going to be honest, I started craving red meat like I had never craved anything before in my life. And I had actually been a vegetarian for 4 years and I've been dairy free for 10. So I wasn't quite a vegan, but I was pretty much living that way. And my body was screaming at me for a long time that I needed to eat a piece of steak. Now, I know this is like silly, but there's actually a point to it because I actually listened to that. Not what I thought I should be eating or what what phase I was in at any given time, but I'm like, hey, I'm recovering and my body is clearly speaking to me louder than it had ever spoken before about a piece of food. essentially. So I listened to that and I actually felt amazing when I, went and bought that first steak in 4 years. So I was like, went to the butcher with like sunglasses on and I tried to, get a sustainable piece because, there's some issues with meat, which we can talk about in a separate conversation. But I did, and it really worked for me. And it was something that really also kind of clicked in my the sense of intuition, which was with me through this entire cancer experience, which was like the listening to myself when the doctor said one thing, but I actually knew something else about my body. The listening to myself when my body was clearly talking to me about what kind of nutrients it needed for healing this particular wound.
Yeah.
And listening to that. And it was such a big lesson in that. And it definitely upped my interest in nutrition in a different way. It kind of like upped the ante a little bit. And so fast forward a couple years, I am in Japan for a year and a half on a contract, and Erica and I found out over Instagram that we were reading the same nutrition book. And we reconnected. We had known each other through our Buddhist community, which she had mentioned earlier, which I came to only about 6 years ago. And so it had been a few years in and we reconnected. And I think our friendship, we realized we had certain things and interests in common. And when I came back from Japan, she invited me to spend more time with her. I think we actually went to an exercise class together and we had never really spent time one-on-one before. We weren't that close. Like we were socially friends, but it was sort of a new level. And we started sharing aspects of our health journeys with each other in a way that even though we had known each other, we had never really opened up and shared about. I didn't know that Erica had a weight loss journey. I didn't know she had this sort of massive physical transformation that left so other aspects for her to really explore about her relationship with herself and her body. And she knew I had gone through the cancer diagnosis and recovery, but she didn't know, hadn't shared with her like the emotional component of that or the or learning about my intuition and trusting myself in a new way. So as we're sharing these stories, we realize, everybody has these stories to tell. And the more we tell them, the less alone we feel in the journey. And the more we can educate ourselves for what's right for us and becoming our own health advocates. And from that, Courageous Wellness, the podcast, was pretty just sort of organically born one day. And to be honest, we both have entertainment backgrounds, but we had no idea about producing a podcast. And it was sort of brilliant. We went in with like blind ignorance, like just enough to not have all the reasons to not do it.
Yeah.
Which was wonderful. It worked in our favor. And we made all the mistakes in the beginning that you do with any new endeavor that you're learning as you go. But with each other and with the support of each other and this partnership that's evolved from it, we were able to create this platform where we could share other people's stories in addition to our own and create this community where people feel empowered to take information that works for them, leave what doesn't. And from that, the Courageous Wellness Collective, including us both going back to school and becoming certified nutrition health coaches, et cetera, which we can go into, but that's how the brand was born. It was really this sort of serendipitous colliding of these two experiences that we had.
Yeah. Oh, thank you both for sharing that because two things I took from what you shared, and it's so interesting how you've had very separate journeys, but there are similar themes that have run throughout. One is from obstacle comes opportunity, because Aly, if you didn't have this cancer diagnosis, and Erica, if you didn't have this weight loss journey, I don't know if you would have come together in the same way or at the same time. It's all about timing, but from those obstacles comes opportunity. And then this other piece about intuition, learning to love and value yourself, for me at least, comes out of a knowing of yourself and trusting yourself and trusting that inner voice that's there and knowing knowing it's there, listening to it, allowing it to be your guide, and then valuing yourself as a result of it. So even though you both went through these very different separate journeys, there are such beautiful themes, I think, that really run through both of them.
Absolutely. And it's in our Buddhist organization, they call it poison into medicine, which is like a really big theme for us. But absolutely, like we couldn't agree more. And we fully believe that it's such a mindset shift to see your life like that. And I think now at, 32 years old, I finally feel like through the pandemic, through everything, even having that experience, I'm really leaning in now whenever an obstacle comes up. It's just kind of the gateway to an opportunity. It's just changing your mind to see it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I feel like you hit the nail on the head with it. Because it's like we inevitably all experience obstacles as human beings. It's a part of the human experience. But as Erica said, it's what can you create from that obstacle? And that's another thing. I think having this sort of same spiritual foundation has been really interesting in building a business with each other on, because we have the same language and we have the same sort of fundamental like foundation in the way we approach these things. And we're very different people. We're good. We complement each other for sure. But we do have this foundation that we share where we know how to also encourage each other when obstacles arise, and also not to be surprised that they will. But oftentimes there's opportunity to create some value out of it for ourselves and for others. And we try to operate from that place. And it's not always easy, but we try to, like, we can keep each other in check in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I love what you both have said about leaning into obstacles. And it is a mindset choice, like, and a shift of seeing the obstacle, knowing it's there, knowing it's going to come at some point, and not being afraid to run away from it. And I'm curious, how have you been able to do that other than just, is it just come down to awareness? Like, I know the obstacles are going to come. How have you been able to, I think, choose that mindset for yourself to lean in and not be afraid? And because sometimes the instinct, I think, is, oh my God, obstacle, running the other way. Like, I don't think naturally run towards these things.
I think for myself, and I don't know about Aly, but I'm sure it's probably similar, but my Buddhist practice really helps having a practice and a community through Courageous Wellness and through the Buddhist organization we're a part of, which is called the SGI USA. I feel so empowered and supported. And, something I really like about my practice, I chant in the morning and I chant in the evening to align my life with the universe and to chant to be in rhythm and all that stuff. But it's such an empowering practice because it teaches that you wouldn't have been born if you didn't have a mission to fulfill, right? Like, we all have a mission, and we all have karma, though, that we come into this world with. And I don't need to go like into deep Buddhist philosophy, but for me, I think leaning into obstacles, it's easier with practice, like having a spiritual practice and then having a community that supports you and good friends, right? Like, I think it's interesting and we talked about this, I feel like, a bit on your episode too, in a roundabout way, but when I went through, right before we started the podcast, I went through a really transitional time in my life, Aly as well. And I feel like when you really start living authentically, it can be very painful because I struggle with terrible anxiety. I have like tons of people pleasing codependency. I'm a Libra, so I love people pleasing and the balance of harmony. But there were a lot of people in my life who weren't the right people in my life. Yeah. And the second I really started to lean into like the discomfort and the obstacle and allowing the transformation to happen, my entire life, again, similar to my self-love journey, it's like my entire life transformed once again. And the podcast happened. Back to school happened, creating this company, this great friendship with Aly. Like she said, we had known each other, but we weren't close. And now, yes, we're like married through the business, but we have such I feel like, real friendship where, like she said, we really complement each other because we couldn't be more different, but it works. Like, it's exactly what I feel like the other needs. So yeah, I hope Aly, I don't know. I'm sure you have your own answer to this question as well. But for me, like the spirituality component and having a daily practice allows me to lean into obstacles with less fear.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm going to not repeat what she said because a lot of it corresponds. But I absolutely align with a lot of that, having a practice. And we see that with guests on our show who've had like incredible sort of journeys, overcome incredible obstacles, have had really kind of a lot of success in different areas, however you define that, right?
Yeah.
But that's something that's been a recurring theme. The practices might be different, but people have practices, and it's a way to connect to yourself, and it's a way to connect to the greater sort of like world and that we live in, and our planet, and our, and I think also, how do we remain courageous? It's like, it's in the title. So if we're not practicing, and it's not always easy, and you're not going to be doing it 100% of the time, but if we're not practicing some sense of courage when obstacles come up, then we're not really aligning with the brand that we have created. And I know that it's, our name is important. It really is like, how do we be authentic in this courageous wellness? And it takes courage to try to practice wellness, whatever that might look like for you, because it's not easy. Just like
No.
spiritual practices are not easy. Getting to know yourself can be painful, as Erica said, or breaking patterns that don't serve you can be really painful. But what's the alternative? It's also painful, and it's not serving you or others. So yeah, I would just add that on.
Yeah, it's so interesting. It's either the pain of staying stagnant or the pain of embracing transformation. And I feel like we all end up coming to that moment for ourselves of, am I good staying where I am, or do I allow myself to sort of step into the next? And I think, Erica, what you said is so interesting. And I'm actually really glad we're moving into this direction, because what you said about as part of Buddhist philosophy is we all have a mission, but we also all have karma. And so I feel like whatever language someone, attaches to this, it's this theme of the more you step into your purpose or your mission or your path, there's a shedding that occurs, and you have to embrace it and move with it and allow yourself the opportunity, I think, to step into it. And so I'm just really grateful for what you both have shared, because I think for a lot of us, we expect, oh, I found my thing, it's going to be easy. Or like, oh, I found my thing, and like it's all going to unfold perfectly. And the truth is it doesn't work that way. It takes time and trusting yourself and allowing yourself to step forward in that way. And so having an anchor of an empowering practice, like you said, Erica, I think that's huge.
Yeah, I think, there's this concept too in our practice called human revolution. I feel like it's like the pillar of our Buddhist practice, to be honest. And the international president of our organization, his name is Daisaku Ikeda. He has this beautiful quote that I love. And he says, a great human revolution in a single individual can change the destiny of a nation and all humankind, because it really is that revolutionary to do your human revolution, to change these patterns, to, like you said, like, are we going to have the pain of staying stagnant, or are we going to have the pain of stepping into our truth and our purpose? And so, yeah, I think all of that, like even back to your original question of like, that makes it less scary when there's no other option, because staying stagnant is just as painful. And it's change is the only constant we have in life. And Aly has really helped me with that, because this is not my tendency is not to like embrace change and embrace, but especially I'd say this last year, it's really forced, I feel like, all of us to reflect in a different way.
Yeah. It's an interesting journey, but I think it's one that's definitely worthwhile. And I think part of transformation is what you said about it being a revolution. And part of that is being an advocate for yourself and speaking up. And I think this is so much the crux of your show, is like being your own health advocate and knowing what works for you. And Aly, it goes back to your part of your journey with listening to your body when it was like screaming for red meat after you were basically a vegetarian for as long as you could remember. And so I'm curious, what your perspectives are when it comes to being your own health advocate. If there's somebody out there that's like, yeah, this concept sounds great, but like how? Like, how do I begin to voice my opinion or voice my concerns or really tune in to myself in this way, so that I am able to advocate for myself in a wellness or a health setting?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because it's difficult, and we're not all taught all aspects of our health and medical system.
No, no, we're
um,
definitely not.
we're definitely not, and what can often be working in our favor and what can be working against us. Also, this might get big, but also in the context of the food industry or agriculture, all these things that like fundamentally are deeply all connected.
Mhm.
And when you're speaking especially about your physical health, but that also relates to our mental health and our emotional health. We're not compartmentalized creatures, so the body is whole, and we have a system that compartmentalizes it. So that can be a little difficult to navigate sometimes. So, where do we start? I would say the first thing is like, be confident in asking questions. If you don't understand something, whether you're in a doctor's office or you're reading an article about something or you're listening to a podcast, if you hear something, whether it's really specific to your personal medical situation or health situation, or just generally in a concept that you feel just like interested in, I would say start by asking questions. Like, we have to be detectives a little bit. And it can be overwhelming because we're constantly being sold a million things. So also keep that in mind. Like, we're constantly being sold hacks or health hacks or that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
sometimes there can be like might be a little sliver of value in it, but oftentimes it's like really like diet culture driven, or it's really about profit. So, and there's also not like, we are bio individual creatures, so like what might work for me might not work for you. That's something to keep in mind too. But anyway, if you're feeling overwhelmed as you start to become the detective in your own journey, I would say, um, be be a detective to the point of where you can maybe find some professionals that you really trust. You really trust their opinion, and you can rely on sort of going to them. And it's not to not have your own opinion or critical thinking around it, but that like you've built a sense of trust around. I have a few professionals that I really value what they say. So I'll constantly like, if I'm exploring a concept for myself, I might go and listen to a podcast episode that he or she records. So, those are just a few little pieces of advice I'd give just to start out with for being your own health advocate.
Yeah, I think love what you said about being a detective and
Yeah.
asking questions and not being afraid to ask questions. I think sometimes we can feel intimidated, like, is this going to be a stupid question? Or like, are they going to, you know what I mean? There's no such thing as a stupid question when it comes
Yeah.
to your health or your wellness. And I think part of being a health advocate too, for yourself, I think a lot of us view wellness sometimes as being inaccessible or it looks glamorized, right? Like
Totally.
sometimes I think historically, when we talk about wellness or we talk about self care or anything sort of under the broader umbrella, it's stereotyped a certain way. Self care is often only labeled as like the physical things like that you can do to take care of your body, but self care goes far beyond. It's mental, it's emotional, it's spiritual. So I think sometimes the wellness industry itself can be really viewed as inaccessible. It's certainly not affordable. And I think this goes back to what you were talking about, Erica, earlier
Yeah.
about how this is a huge passion of yours, making wellness and the food industry in general more affordable and accessible. And so I'm curious, like, how do we start to do that? Like, what have you guys found? I know you've talked to so many people, and this is a huge passion of yours. And so I would really love to spend, a little bit of time talking about it.
Yeah, I think it is something, like I said, that's really it's something that we're both very passionate about. And, at that time, like I said, I was on free lunch program at school. My mom was working 2 jobs. We would get fast food after school because it was $1 and convenient. And, and we didn't even I don't think we had health insurance when I was in middle school. Like it was that serious. And so, we were so fortunate in so many ways, as well, because we had a family friend who was a doctor, and, I was in a community that I'd grown up with people who knew my family. But again, it's something that Aly and I are so passionate about because I've been, to wellness events when we still had them in person. And, the things people can be very out of touch. And I just remember I asked a question at one, it was a panel. And I think we have to speak up, right? Like about like with anything, when we see the out of touchness happening, right? We have to speak up. We have to ask questions because, to be honest, I've heard so many times, like, who would feed their children fast food, or you have to make the time to cook. And so making the time is such a luxury. Like time is such a luxury. And so many people are working 2 or 3 jobs and then have to feed their family. And I'm sorry, like, I don't care if someone tells me like, well, you can use food stamps now at farmers market, or you can do this. Yes, that all might be true. But if you're coming off like a 15-hour day and you have 3 little kids to feed and you can get a full meal for your family for $5, how are we competing with that? Right? Like, how are we competing with that? And it's such an education too, issue as well, because to be honest, until I got into this world, I had no idea. I thought healthy were 100-calorie packs. So many people are living thinking things are healthy that are not actually healthy, right? We're all children. I feel like we're all similar age, where we grew up in the 90s, the early 2000s, the 2010s. And it really was, right? Like low fat, like no fat, like all this just bad crap for you that is still ingrained in so many people that is healthy. And we're just making ourselves sick, and we're just a sick nation, so there's so many problems. But I think for me, really speaking up when we see the injustices in our own community is something that's really important to Aly and I. We have really hard conversations on our podcast. And like we said, we're not afraid to raise our hand at an event and talk about these things. But yeah, we have to have dialogue. We have to talk about it, because a lot of people are just out of touch and they don't realize it, and they've never, right? It's easy to say, well, make the time or use your food stamp at farmers market. But if you've never lived it, you don't think, well, how do they even get to the farmers market? And people are living in food deserts where they don't even have access to fresh food, even if their food stamps would cover the fresh food. So there's so many issues. And then in addition to that, Aly and I, in our own company and with our own brand, accessibility is very, very important to us. We launched, I don't know when this is going to be released, but as of March 1st, Aly and I created a Patreon page for accessible health coaching education content. It's a subscription service where we're going to be offering 4 videos a month of educational nutrition tools and habit building content with recipes and resources and so much more. But that's all going to be accessed for $8.99 a month. So no matter who you are, no matter where you're at, for 2 cups of coffee, if you want to educate yourself on nutrition and have a health coach, which can also like be very inaccessible, you can do that for $8.99 a month. So it's just something that I feel like is embedded in everything Aly and I do. That's our goal.
Yeah. Yeah, we're certainly striving to, and I think it'll continue to evolve as we continue to evolve. And, but yeah, Erica and I, like she just mentioned, with the creation of the subscription service, we want to be able to bring health coaching, if people want access to it, in a way that is accessible and affordable. Cause you're right. It's like, it's not affordable. And it's also it's not inclusive either. No. And I think that's a really important conversation. And we've had that conversation probably for a couple of years now on the podcast, because the second we became immersed in this world, especially of Los Angeles wellness, and people might look at us. I mean, we're two white blonde women, to be honest,
I mean,
but
the three of
that's
us are at this
the
point,
three.
right?
Yeah.
So I 100%. Yeah.
But we started going to these events and we're like, why does everybody white and blonde
Mm-hmm.
and seemingly very wealthy, which we came from a point of like, okay, like even though we're in this world, like this seems really inaccessible.
Yeah.
And so we actually started branching out at that point and going to events in different parts of the country. And we went to Philly to like this huge wellness event, which was so fun. And we started doing episodes on how we can make this stuff, if people want access to it, make it more accessible to anybody who wants it, because this shouldn't cost a lot of money. And
No.
if you can invest even a teeny tiny bit of money, like $8 a month, you might be able to also, as someone who had cancer, you might also be able to not fall into the amount of like insane expense of healthcare in this country. And that's another conversation. I mean, listen, we could talk for years about the problems in healthcare, the problems in the food industry, food, Erica mentions food deserts. It's even called food apartheid because it's so racially discriminating. We know now with COVID numbers, how especially communities of color are suffering way more, and the death rates are way higher. And it's all inextricably linked, our food system, our healthcare system. And so we don't want to perpetuate anything that's not helpful to like most people. We want to create ways to open up access.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we're not perfect at it, but we're trying, and I'm really excited about our Patreon subscription. And we will be offering through that too, even one-on-one private office hours every week. So it might not be like, weekly individual hour sessions with a health coach, but even for $8 a month, you're going to have access to private health coaching services. So, yeah.
That's very cool. I'm excited for you both because I think that's a really important step forward in making knowledge and information more accessible. I'm really struck though by what you both talked about, and especially what you said, Erica. If you haven't lived it, you just don't know. And I think that's such a big theme in wellness and something that we need to focus more heavily on is if you haven't lived that experience, can you actually speak to it? And should you be speaking to it? Or should we really be opening the door for somebody else to come through and share that experience? And I think it's the latter. And I think you both feel the same way. And I think for so long, what has bugged me, like truly bugged me about wellness, and it sounds like this is what has bothered you too, is there are so many people who speak from really a space of privilege about like health issues in a very broad sense. And I think if we want to talk about things broadly, that's totally fine. But there's things that we all uniquely know and have experienced that's important to share. And so I love what you both talked about, just about really making the space more diverse. And I think in light of COVID, wellness, at least what we're seeing online and different events and conversations, it is getting a little bit more diverse and a little bit more inclusive. But there's still a lot more work to be done,
Yeah.
So it's an interesting conversation.
You reminded me of something. We did this great episode with Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams, and he is plant-based and he's really trying to change his community. And community is, he's the Brooklyn Borough President, so primarily in Brooklyn. But he said something that really struck me on the episode and has really stayed with me. And it reminds me of what you just said, where he said, we can't we can't meet people where we are at. We have to meet people where they are at.
Oh, that's
and
good.
It's so good. And it has stayed with me since he said it. So we have to meet people where they're at, not where we're at.
Yeah. And I love what you talked about too, Aly, just in the context of making access to knowledge about food more accessible and doing that through your program and your office hours. Because the truth is, I mean, when you brought up 100-calorie packs, I started like laughing on the inside because I used to eat 2 of them, 3 of them. I thought, oh, it's no big deal. They're 100-calorie packs. And then you forget. And then it's just our knowledge growing up, I think in the 90s and the early 2000s, it just was not there. And it's still
Well,
not there all the time.
no, but I think, you know, Aly and I are also really food positive. So like if you're listening to this and you love a 100-calorie pack,
Keep eating
love
them.
that 100-calorie pack. But it's about the education, again, like education, because when I was eating 100-calorie packs, I didn't know, right, what that was doing to my body and how it was actually making me hungrier and craving more food, right? So it's just once you have the knowledge, eat however you want to eat, but you're not being tricked and programmed. And like Aly, you shared earlier, we're always being sold something. So I think, again, back to that health advocacy question, the more we educate ourselves, then we can make choices. And you can be like, I'm choosing this delicious salad because I want it, or I'm choosing, you know, to go to In-N-Out because I want it. But you become more empowered. But Aly and I are very food positive. So I just want to say that if anyone's listening, they like love their 100-calorie packs, no hate, just we just want to know what we're eating and all of that good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. It all comes back to knowledge and having that knowledge for yourself and, having the knowledge and then making the decision that works for you. It's like, I feel like this is the theme of the conversation is how do we get more knowledge for ourselves? How can we educate ourselves so that we're making empowered choices to be our own advocate in these spaces, which I think is really important. You know, I could talk to you both all day. I have a couple questions I want to close this out with if I can. My first is, you know, do you have an affirmation or a motto or something that you hold on to that has helped you or encouraged you along your, you know, wellness journey over the last, I don't know how many years?
That's a good question. Well, as Erica said, because our spiritual practice is such a big part of what we do, the words that we chant every day just keep kind of popping into my head. And it's not in English, but it's Nam Myoho Renge Kyo is what we chant. So that's sort of like what I would say is like the mantra essentially, like every day, which is just, there's a lot of different interpretations, but it's like I pay devotion to the mystic law of cause and effect through sound is essentially one of the translations.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. And it's really like so aligning. So that I would say primarily. But you know, there's so many. And from a nutrition standpoint, that like let food be thy medicine. I mean, as we are food positive because food can be real food, can be so healing and so nourishing and can be emotionally nourishing as well as physically nourishing. And so for me, I just look at food and like I say, I define food in a certain way, but I look at food as like this amazing thing that the earth has given us. And we can use it for our greatest health. So that's what I would say as far as like my mantra or phrase.
Yeah. I agree with Aly. I chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo every day. And I think of different things when I'm chanting the words, like it's an active, we think while we chant, and that changes day by day, but that's my mantra. That's what I do twice a day.
I love this theme of nourishing yourself though, like nourishing yourself through your practice, through the food, through what we do every day. I mean, you didn't say this was your mantra, but in some ways, if I could encapsulate what you both said, I think it's about nourishment.
Yeah,
it's beautiful.
Absolutely.
Okay, my next question for both of you, and this is the question I ask everybody that comes on the podcast, and that is, what is your biggest dream?
Ooh.
I have a lot of dreams. I dream really big. I am like an optimist and I truly believe anything and everything is possible because someone's going to do it. So why not you? Career or personal? Are we talking both?
Whatever.
I think career wise, I think Aly and I have had many conversations about where we see courageous wellness going long term. And I know because of both of our backgrounds, and we would love to turn our Courageous Wellness into, go more into media, however that may look. Be it digital media or television is something we really see as part of our path. And then again, I think Aly and I would really, or I certainly, I don't want to speak for you, Aly, over and over again. You could answer this question too, but I really do see Courageous Wellness coaching going into schools and lower income areas. And again, just starting with the Patreon, I really want to help educate and inform and empower individuals all over about their own health and wellness, and that it doesn't have to be so hard and expensive. And I don't think food should be expensive, as we were talking about, like an apple shouldn't cost more than, processed junk. So that's kind of my personal career dreams. And then, I'd love to just live in nature with my husband and a bunch of dogs.
I love it.
Maybe a kid one day. That's my personal dream.
I love it.
Yeah, I feel like we both are craving a little bit more nature with our partners in post-COVID or current COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say mine align pretty well with Erica. So that what she explained is really the great vision for Courageous Wellness. And we're open to the avenues that's going to take. But I also, part of it, and I know you can probably relate to this also as a host and the kind of work that you do on your show, but the storytelling aspect of it is really important. The telling of stories and the telling of stories by many different voices, diverse voices in this space, in the health and wellness space. And whether that's through the medium of television or, documentary style, whatever, however it, manifests. I just think that I want to continue to tell stories on an even larger scale and share those stories.
I love that. So much about our visions is about speaking them into existence and sharing them. So thank you both for sharing your dreams. And this has been such a really wonderful conversation. I love where we went from honoring your intuition to being your own advocate in the health and wellness space to how do we make this more accessible and inclusive. And I'm just really grateful for this conversation. So thank you for coming on the podcast. Where can everybody find you, Courageous Wellness, this wonderful new Patreon you've got going on, and connect and learn more?
Yeah.
You want to go ahead?
Yes. You can find us if you are interested in learning more about our health coaching subscription service on Patreon. It is patreon.com/courageous wellness. The podcast is Courageous Wellness. We release episodes every single Wednesday, and we are available on all podcast platforms. We're on Instagram at Courageous Wellness, and our website is courageouswellness.net. So I think that's everything.
It sounds like everything. It sounds great. I'm going to put everything in the show notes. It'll be so easy for everybody to connect with you and learn more. And I'm on your podcast too. And so we'll link that episode. And Aly and Erica, thank you so much again. This was a lot of fun. I'm grateful for the conversation.
Such a treat.
Thank you.